Hello! So something I've been thinking about a lot lately as I've been designing and sewing some new clothes in the Charlie Darwin studio universe is what actually makes a garment, a piece of clothing, interesting to look at. Interesting to wear, interesting to look at, draws some visual attention around the body in a way that's not just flattering, but like there's something about it that just feels a little bit elevated, like it just holds your eye a little bit longer, kind of gives you a double take when you look at it. Maybe it's just that you can tell that there's some sort of intention behind it. I don't know, is this, am I describing interesting clothing to you? I don't know, it's more of the kind of thing I feel like you just know it when you see it kind of thing. And maybe you consider yourself to be kind of a good curator of these kinds of pieces. You feel like you have a good eye for it, I think I have a pretty decent eye for it, but maybe you have some clothes where they're lacking visual interest. You put them on and you're just like, bleh, boring. I feel boring in this. So like I said, I've been designing some new clothes lately to sell over on my website, Charlie Darwin Textiles. I actually just launched my new spring clothing collection. Please do check out the link in the description below if you want to shop anything you see here today. It's all really nice and soft and soothing for your skin. And they're sewn by me in my home studio here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And they're all 100% linen in like a medium weight fabric. And so I have a little bit of constraints there as far as what designs I can lean into because it's a very non-stretchy fabric. But there's a lot going for linen in that it's a really high texture. It gets a little bit softer the more you wash it and wear it, and it is notoriously wrinkly, which I think is a real charm and perk of it because it has this like built-in added intrigue and texture to it that you can see, like it just kind of like wrinkles and warps around the collar and the neckline and around seams and stuff like that. And so as I'm designing garments, I'm actually really trying to lean into that harder and push the visual intrigue of each garment a little bit further. I don't want to create any boring, lame-o garments. And these aren't going to be big dramatic features. We are, after all, working, with linen fabric every day wear. These aren't like Project Runway explosive designs. There are things that I want to still feel really comfortable on the body and subtle and be able to mix and match well with different accessories and tops and bottoms and jackets and stuff like that. Okay, so those are constraints that we've been working with. Okay, so I've got about, I think like 5 or 6 different intriguing design features that I experimented with this season that I want to show you, and maybe some of them will be good inspo for you to curate into your own earthy, cute wardrobe. And if not, if you look at them and you're like, those are so ugly, then hey, now you know what you don't like. It's all subjective, but I went with my heart and vision and gut and all of the bodily reactions to the design process, and I'm really excited about them. So let's just dive right in without further ado. Here we go. All right, first up is the heron dress. And what I want to point out on this dress, it's like a V-neck, loose, boxy, flowy maxi dress with ruffles at the bottom. It's very like, I'd say like earthy country chic farmhouse a little bit. And one of my favorite design features that I want to point out on this is the pockets. So I basically had a few options of how to do pockets. You can do inseam pockets, and those get nested into the side seam, and they're the ones that tend to like flap around on the inside. And I've used those for tons of my designs. They're nice because it doesn't look like you necessarily have pockets, but I'm honestly a little bit sick of sewing those types of pockets, and I also wanted something that is just falls flat, and when you wash and dry it, there's no ironing that needs to be done because there's no pocket that kind of shrivels up on the inside. But the cool thing I did was I nested a little ruffled edge into the pocket opening. So when you put your hand in like this, you get this light ruffled edge. And I did it with the selvage of the fabric, which is the edge that's kind of bound by the manufacturer. And the fabric I use, it has sort of like a soft fray to it that doesn't come undone, it doesn't unravel, but it's actually the strongest part of the fabric, which makes by putting a selvage edge into my pocket and also having like a binding on the pocket. It really makes this pocket opening super strong and durable. So that's the nitty-gritty of the pocket. What I think it does design-wise is really visually elongate the body as it sort of runs from the vertical and then curves out subtly towards the end of the pocket. And also that little ruffling, I think, adds a lot of softness to the garment without adding any bulk. It sort of diffuses those what would be harsh seam lines into more of a floof diffusion of the fabric. And I think I lean into ruffles a lot because I feel like they feel very playful, and an element of play is a sort of piece of the intrigue or interest concept that I'm trying to build. And also the texture of this ruffle at the pocket mirrors the ruffle down at the bottom of the hemline and sort of balances it out throughout the body. All right, garment number 2 is my Finch top, which is probably going to be a favorite for me. I'm probably going to be wearing it all summer. It's so comfy. Okay, we'll get into separate parts of it, but let's actually just start at the collar. This is where I feel like I brought a lot of intrigue up by the face. Specifically, I added, you guessed it, another ruffle. Ruffles, I think, just work so well with linen because they lean into that texture that I was talking about and that wrinkly, crinkly sort of added softness. And this is the first time I've ever done ruffles in a collar like this. I have before incorporated like the flat selvage edge. You can see in another one of my videos how I do this, but this time I actually made like a proper ruffle, no raw edges exposed, and it's just popping so delicately out of that band collar there. And I always like to put a button. Sometimes I go back and forth about whether I want a button on the collar stand itself. I love the look of just like a clean collar stand, but also when I'm wearing button-up shirts, I really love the kind of unique, bizarre, unconventional look of just being completely buttoned up all the way to the neck. There's something a little bit like artsy or interesting about it. But I kept this ruffle, again, very small, very dainty. I wanted to add charm without being too dramatic or itchy around the neckline. And I think what it does is it offers a lot of visual interest near the face, which is ideal for things when you're like on video or doing Zoom calls or you're meeting someone. I think the ruffle really softens what would be otherwise a more rigid, structured neckline. And, you know, I love a good band collar. That's this style of collar that's short and it doesn't have, you know, the traditional kind of points like this. I've put it on tons of my designs. But sometimes, to be completely honest, even though I think it looks the best on my silhouette, it gives a little bit of like chef coat vibes. So I think this little bit of ruffle really softens that and adjusts that narrative. And it just kind of like screws with it a little bit. I think it looks polished, but easy and easygoing. Still professional. I think it would look really cute, like peeking out from under overalls or a cardigan or something like that. Okay, next design feature. The feature I love absolute most, possibly of this whole collection, is the seam running all the way across the upper bust of the Finch top. It is just absolutely so fun and drapey to me. The seam line on the sewing pattern looks kind of like curved right here. When the sleeve is pulled straight, it is like a very shallow V in a straight line, and it helps sort of give this little arching shape when your arms are down, and when pulled straight out, you can get more of that linear shape. I think what these gathers do is they really add a lot of dimension and texture to the top without making it overly frilly or super hyper feminine or just kind of fluff that gets in the way. It's adding that dimension just straight into the bodice falling down from above the bust. And I think that the long line from sleeve hem to sleeve hem, it really makes the shirt look interesting to me. Like the shirt was kind of like sliced in half and then scrunched up and reassembled. And then I think the subtle dip with the V shape here in the center of the chest, it creates a little bit more shapeliness to the bust line. And the functionality of this is so important. It really gives this like upper part space to be more flat against the body for kind of like the slimming portion going into your head, and then just deep comfort with this coming out over your chest. So comfortable to wear without a bra. I think that's why I'm going to wear this shirt the most, is because out of all the clothes I own, I think it's the least obvious that I'm not wearing a bra. Because there's so much texture happening right here and room to kind of flow around that my boobs are just kind of like lost in the mix, and I love that. That's perfect for me. I think it still adds that shapeliness, and then you can also tuck the shirt in to a pair of shorts. It can help redefine that silhouette. And lastly, what I think this does for the design is it mirrors the texture that's added in our collar up here and sort of draws that texture down through the silhouette so that your eye keeps kind of moving throughout the visual interest points of the garment. All right, next we've got our cicada shorts, and mine are looking a little bit wrinkly right now because I was wearing them the other day, but I'm super excited for these shorts. They're actually sort of a remake of a pair of shorts I had created a couple years ago. I had called them the Harvester shorts, if you remember them. And I want to bring that up, that this is sort of a remake of an old garment, because basically I looked at this old design I had and thought, how can I make this better? I like the fit overall of these shorts, but how can I make them just a little bit cuter and more interesting? Because I think they were falling flat and they weren't giving me the visual interest or the shape even that I wanted on my body to pair with some of my other clothes. So the first key feature I want to focus on here is the flat front waist. It's not the entire front from side seam to side seam. It's just actually like the first, like I think it's like a 7-inch span here. And I think this design feature makes it more flattering of a look in the front, because the old shorts, as they gathered all the way around, they had a lot of kind of parachuting extra fabric in the front crotch area that wasn't as slimming. And so having this flat front here gives a little bit more structure and reduces the bulk at the tummy and the crotch. And I think from a design perspective, it also gives a really interesting relief from the high texture that's going all the way around the back and the sides. It's a great contrast for that. And in case you don't know, this is called a paper bag waist, where you have sort of the extra frilly bits up here. Instead of it being just like a solid flat waistband, it extends up higher than the elastic so that you get some of that ruffling up at the top. And I think paper bag waists can definitely be cute, but sometimes, especially like on the old pants I had made, I feel like it literally looks like your body and your butt has been poured into a paper bag and then just cinched. I don't think it's super flattering, and so I think that this flat front really just helps break up that look. And I don't know, I think it kind of looks really good with tucked in tops as well, which I knew when I was creating the Finch shirt, I wanted to make a pair of shorts that paired with it really well, and I wanted this shirt to be able to be tucked in. So I was kind of thinking of those two things at once. All right, second feature I want to look into on these shorts are the pockets, because this was also a revamp from my old design as well. You'll see on the old Harvester shorts that I just did like a patch pocket just placed right on top of front of the pant leg, and it looks okay. It looks fine. But I wanted something that was a little bit more embedded or like integrated into the design. And so that's how I came up with this pocket that's nested into two different seams and has a pocket opening that's straight and on the diagonal. And so you end up with a lot of, on these pants, you have your vertical lines, which down the center front, which help elongate the pant leg and I think make these shorts look more slimming with those vertical lines. But then to break that up a little bit, you have these diagonals on the pocket with a lot of extra top stitching, which I think adds an interesting dynamic of structure to these shorts. And we're playing with lines a lot if you wear this as the full outfit with the cinch top, because you end up with this horizontal, well, let's see, you start with the vertical line of the quarter button, the horizontal across the chest, and then you get the vertical lines down the center front of the shorts with some diagonal lines coming out at the pockets. And all this helps the eye kind of move down throughout the garment. And I did a bit of an extra thick pocket, like binding here, self-facing, that makes the pocket not only more durable, and it's super durable because it's nested into these seam lines right here, but doing this thicker diagonal and then adding lots of seam lines on top, like I have 2 and 2 running throughout, I think that adds, it's very subtle, it's super subtle, but I think that it adds more polished look and it adds more detail without adding bulk in the hip area, keeping this design still like really slimming. All right, and last but not least is my Sanctuary romper. Now, if you've been around for a little bit for the last season, Sanctuary is a different design I have on my website that's like this really big epic flowy jumpsuit. You can get the sewing pattern for it and the garment made to measure in my shop. And the sewing pattern, I had included options for everyone to make a shorts version of it. And so I was excited to play around with that. And as I was making it, you'll just notice a few adjustments. I did it just as the pattern is actually the entire way. So the only adjustment I did was that I didn't add the waist elastic, because when I went to try it on without the elastic, I actually just loved the free flowing kind of childlike, playful, flowy vibe that it gave me without having that cinching at the waist. It's very just like boxy and flowy, and I know that's not everyone's cup of tea for sure, but I think it has its time and place, and I was really excited about it when I tried it on. So I've talked a ton about the features of this jumpsuit in some of my past videos and my email newsletters and stuff. So I'm just gonna like super briefly touch on some of the cool design features here, because I do think there's some that are worth re-highlighting. But one design feature that I think adds some intrigue to this garment is the way that you get in and out of it, which is the back flap. So instead of having, like on a jumpsuit, a lot of jumpsuits have like a button up front or a zipper of some sort, but I wanted none of those things. I wanted it to just be like a nice, simple front. And so for the back, I did an overlapping back flap. So these two pieces overlap, and occasionally you get a little bit of a peekaboo moment back here, which I love. And I finish it off with just like a simple enclosure at the back neckline. So yeah, hopefully that was a fun way for us to think about what makes a garment interesting. And a lot of times it's in these little details that you might not necessarily notice right off the bat, but it's all about kind of thinking about where can I add texture and lines where my eyes can sort of flow through the garment. I think that's where I find the most intrigue on a garment. And yeah, maybe you have better words for it than me. You can leave it in the comments. I feel a little bit tongue-tied on this topic of what is interesting, and you know, that's probably different to everyone, but this is what I find interesting. And if you've got a favorite detail from anything I showed today, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear which one draws your eye the most. And just a reminder that the new clothing collection launched today, so go get yourself some cute linen garments made by me. And if you'd rather make these garments yourself, you're going to want to join my email newsletter so that you know exactly when I turn these designs into sewing patterns that you can buy. All right, thank you so much for being here with me today. And if you're interested in knowing more about how I design garments from the heart, what kind of questions I consider and ask myself in the process, then you're going to love this next video I've got for you.